Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heritage and Cultural Society of Africa, HACSA's 2021 live webinar series under the theme, Bridging the Gap. Thank you for joining us. My name is Yvonne Bochwe, and I am the representative for the Ghana branch of the HACSA Foundation. We chose the theme of Bridging the Gap so that we could explore, discuss, and highlight the various ways in which we are eliminating the linguistic, cultural, social, geographic, or trade-related barriers that keep the African diaspora apart. Today, in our second webinar for 2021, we are honored to have with us an inspiring leader and visionary, Ms. Lisa Mensah, to discuss with us various aspects of cultural diversity as it pertains to her exemplary life and career. Welcome, Ms. Mensah, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss the topic of lessons in cultural diversity.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
Wonderful. So we'll begin with our first question. In the United States, February is celebrated as Black History Month. For us at HACSA, we celebrate Black history every month. Ms. Mensah, do you think acknowledging February as Black History Month is a tool to make people consciously think about Black history? If so, is it working? And how is it celebrated?
Well, thank you. It's great to have HACSA open its doors to me, to so many people today. Yes, I actually think it's a great tool. I think piercing through consciousness to talk about African history, the history of African Americans, it's a hard thing to do. And at least by designating this month, people smile, that's the shortest month that got designated African Black History Month. But I think it gives a structure so that schools and places of worship and businesses and kind of every official channel is sort of open to the possibility of talking about Black history in our country. And I actually think that's good. Is it working is a deeper question. And anybody that's ever studied marketing or has ever studied, has been a teacher, the ultimate proof is, what changed because of this? Did we actually change people's mind? Did we open up a door? Did we do something new for people? I think this year, because our country has really been racked with this pandemic and a racial awakening that happened after the murder of George Floyd, I think this year it has been particularly effective because I think people are hungry for more connection. And I think it's made us pay attention more. So I'm happy we have this month for Black history. And I think it's been more effective, particularly this year, in opening eyes and ears.
Wonderful, exactly. I love that phrase, piercing through consciousness. I think it's very powerful. So the question of cultural identity is an important one, but it is also an individual one that can be fraught with socio-political undertones. Growing up in Oregon as the daughter of an immigrant from Ghana and a white American, what was your sense of cultural identity?
This is a tricky question. So I had an unusual upbringing. In fact, until we had Obama, I thought I was the only one that had an African father and a white American mother. And, my sense, I was very much raised to feel like a Ghanaian American. My birth announcement had a Bridging the Gap symbol on it, the topic of our discussion. And I think I grew up in an almost entirely white community until I was a teenager and we joined a Black church. My community, my playmates, my teachers were entirely white, never had a Black teacher. And the people in our house, though, were largely Ghanaians or members of the African diaspora. We were kind of the hub. My father came to study here in the 1950s, and it made him kind of an elder statesman for all of the diaspora. So my identity was very much I'm a Ghanaian American. And I was kind of always on show and tell mode because most of my playmates barely knew Africa, let alone Ghana. But my identity, I felt American. I felt loved in my community. But I knew there was this important side of me. And I'd lived as a child in Ghana, but it wasn't my experience as a school kid so Yvonne, that's a deep question. And it took me a while to realize that many Americans think about their heritage in very varied ways. It's just when you're the only kid of color, you get to think about it every day. So, but I would say very much for me, a Ghanaian American.
Yes, love that. It's interesting when you say you get to think about it every day. It can often be viewed as a blessing or,
Or hard, yeah. Yes. You never really, if you're the one brown face, except for my brother and sister, in the entire school, you're gonna be different. So I realized that deep in me is a sense of kind of always being the one a little bit on stage. You go to school and your hair is different than every other kid's, and let alone your family's doing different things. There's a movie that came out, it was called My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and the Greek heroine of the movie has to show her family to her white boyfriend. And when they arrive at her family's house, they're roasting a goat in the front yard. And I love that movie because it kind of felt like this was my life. Thankfully, we roasted the goat in the backyard, but this sense of always being different. And I remember discussing this movie with my Greek dry cleaner. And he said, Lisa, we're all Greek. Like this is our story. The reason we all love this movie is this is America. Like we've all got these hilariously immigrant roots that everybody's a little different. TV would tell us something different, but we're all a little like this. So anyway, but yes, this was growing up in Oregon for me.
All right, let's continue discussing your formative years, but let's focus now on your college days at Harvard University. What was your experience like as a Black woman at one of the most prestigious universities in the United States?
Yeah. Well, again, there weren't too many of us. This was, let's be honest, I'll be honest about my age. This was 40 years ago that I was in college. So it was a different time. There was, Harvard is still about 1,600 kids in a class, in a graduating class. Probably about 100 of them were African-American of the diaspora. And so we were a pretty small portion. Now, I think, my son's there. I think half of the kids consider themselves to be of color. But for me, I think I had the first experience of questioning, did I belong? And I think that's the kind of embedded questions that often come when you're from far. And remember, I'm not just a Black woman, I'm a Black woman from Oregon. I mean, there's only 10 kids that go to Harvard from Oregon every year, and so I had my early experience were, did I really fit in? The happy end of the story is that I did. And Harvard is a little Hogwarts. It forges community. And it does that, mostly by its living arrangements and by what we all engage in. And I ended up with the soul friends of my life from this place. And, it's a school of 1,600 student body presidents. I was one, so were most of my roommates. So they have to give us all something to do, So I found I was active in the Model UN, active in singing, So for me, I ended up with a kind of traditional American college experience. There's always a layer of outsiderness when you're a Black person going through white institutions. And it was a much whiter institution 40 years ago than it is now. So while the end of my story is happy and I felt loved and at home, the daily grind was often, you know, trying to position myself. I'll tell you one story. Harvard actually uses students as the cleaning crew, and it's called dorm crew. And you're paid, it's the best paid job on campus to help clean dorms. And you keep this job. I came for a fall cleanup, and then you keep this job. And it's really grunt work. You're cleaning bathrooms. And I remember that as I'm walking through Harvard Yard with my mop and my bucket and, you know, scrubby clothes, I am not perceived as a student, you know. I am perceived, you know, and later everybody understands it's the students who clean. But at the beginning, when you're a freshman, you know, you're showing up to clean people's rooms, and, you know, you're not always, I was perceived as help, you know. So there was a sense of being distant, but I will say that the community forced overcoming that, and I made my way. So, as did many who didn't come from, you know, legacy families or privilege. So
it's nice to see that. I guess at the end, it ended up, you know, well.
It ended well. I did turn in my mop and found better jobs. I found that job where you could do your work and at an inside desk.
So from those early campus days, I think you've even touched upon the difference between your son's experience now, but from those early campus days, what in your opinion has changed for Black women in America?
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I think about it. I hire Black women now. I'm a manager. I was responsible for 5,000 people at the Department of Agriculture. You know, I think a lot of barriers have been broken. So it feels to me for Black women, and I'll speak as professional women, that a lot of, we're not the only ones anymore. So a lot of barriers have been broken. I think the microaggressions, the sort of, gee, is your hair naturally like that? What do you do? You know, maybe there's a little less of that now than the just overt dumbness that I would call microaggressions. I think what is still persistent, and this is the level I think we're finally discussing more overtly, is deeper bias. So to me, bias is what prevents you from moving forward in power. And it's what people doubt you on. Can you handle the challenge? Can you run a whole division? Can you, and I think we can, but I think what is often still confronting Black women in this society is the bias that is of low expectation, and which often holds back. And this is why it's so hard to pierce through, to find to have mentors who trust you, to, you know, bias is deeper to me. And it is what I think when we're really talking about power and about ability to rise, you know, we're facing still old demons, and that's a harder fight. It's more baked in.
Yeah, exactly. For those of you that are just joining us, we are fortunate to be speaking with Ms. Lisa Mensah, President and CEO of Opportunity Finance Network and former U.S. Undersecretary for Agriculture, on the topic of lessons in cultural diversity. Ms. Mensah, you have a similar family background to President Barack Obama. Your mother was white American from the Midwest, your father African, although from Ghana and not Kenya, and your significant other, your husband, is African American. Have you met President Barack Obama before? Did you compare notes on your shared African and American cultural background?
This is a great question. I love that the stories are so similar. I have met the president. I have met him, but we didn't get a long chat. So we've not had that note comparing. My husband went to law school with the president, so they know each other pretty well. And I am looking forward. We didn't know each other at that time. I am looking forward someday to comparing those notes. I find great similarity in our stories. We're the same age. And I think the one part I would have loved to share with the president while my father was alive is I got to keep my father longer. You know, his father died earlier in his life and separated from his mom earlier. So I benefited from having my father longer with me in my life. But there's so many similarities. We're gonna have fun. We have, our lives continue to be intertwined. So someday we'll have a lovely talk, but he did the better thing. He wrote the book. This is one of my first conversations to talk about my dreams of my father or my heritage. So yeah, it will be fun.
Well, we'd love to read your book as well as hear the, outcome of the discussion when you compare notes.
Right, maybe we'll do a joint one. Come to HACSA and do a joint interview.
Exactly. So speaking more on your father, are there any values that your father taught you which you feel are uniquely African?
Yeah. I've been thinking about my dad. One of the joys of my life was coming to a HACSA conference in 2017 with my dad, who spoke. He was really the Nkrumah generation, and his life was made possible by Nkrumah because he got to go to school and got a scholarship to America. So I've been thinking a lot about him. There's a couple of things that stand out about having this Ghanaian dad raised in Oregon. And the first that's been really standing out for me is hard work. Dad was just he's a farmer from Sinyani. There was no amount of work that was too daunting. And I think that never being scared of hard work was one of the first things. And boy, he was not scared of assigning us, my siblings, hard work, weeding gardens, doing hard work. That was just par for the course. A second thing that really stands out for me is this Ghanaian sense of respect. How is respect owed? And in this, we often think of respect to elders and respect to anyone. And I grew up where it was so offensive to my dad to refer to any adult by their first name, and growing up as an American kid, peers did that. So we had to call all of our neighbors. Remember, these are all white people. Auntie and uncle. And that was my entire street. I had to refer to them as Auntie Dixie or Auntie Elizabeth or Auntie Dolores, none of this. And it wasn't until I went to Ghana and I realized something more profound about the concept of respect. It was that you can't really know what's going on for the person. You can't tell by the kind of house they have or job who they really are. And it's a beautiful concept of respect. And Dad took it not just for elders, but also for young people. He was quite moved by the need to respect the child, and something that I think sometimes was a little different from the culture he grew up with. And my last thing that I really think about my dad is that he was a walker. He walked every day, literally like the week before he died, he was still walking. And he died at 87, actually, like in amazing health still, so through his life. But I remember doing a walkathon with him. And at the time, we had to walk 20 miles. And we got blisters. We didn't wear the right shoes. And Dad, for me, I think this is this sense of keep walking, keep doing it. No amount, he came from a culture where no one had cars. So he was the ultimate teacher of persistence, like get out there, keep walking, keep walking. So I'd say work, respect, walk are the things that I like. They're very ingrained in me from my dad, lots of other wonderful things, but they stand out for me.
Those are definitely key values to live by: hard work, respect, and obviously keep walking as well. Love that. We're going to move a little bit away from the personal to more general. Do you feel that there's a divide between Africans that migrated willingly to America, like your father, and those who descend from enslaved Africans? What form does it take, and how can it be bridged?
Well, yes, there's a divide, and it's partly why HACSA exists, to raise it to consciousness and to seek ways to bridge. I think, so yeah, there's a divide. There's never one thing that causes a divide, and there's a divide, and all women aren't the same. My husband and I used to attend church in Brooklyn, New York, and the church would have African American, first generation like me, or African immigrants. It would have Africans from the Southern diaspora. They had the South Carolina club, the North Carolina club, So even amongst African Americans, the African Americans who migrated to Chicago feel different than the African Americans who migrated to New York. We know that there are divides in and amongst all of us who are Black. And so for me, that bridge question is one that has to be forged in community. And to me, having a friendship, love, the deep things are the best ways to bridge, because we let down our guards a little bit, and we start to have shared experiences, and we are open to learning. And I think these are the traits of HACSA, right? That we are open to learning about each other. We are not going to take Hollywood's answer or, some publication's answer. We are going to be open to learning. And to me, that's the start of the bridging, and to realize that it's just a different journey for all of us, But I've never found anything more effective to bridging divides as to, it's that pierce sense. You've got to pierce through to why you care about someone. The deeper, there'll be audiences where you're with many, many, many people, but if you can share an experience together, you will bridge divides. You may not agree, but you will bridge divides. And I think that is a powerful gift we can give each other if we can share some kind of, is what makes this pandemic so darn hard. We're trying to have an experience on Zoom together. It's so much it's so much better when you can talk, eat, smell, share, but we're trying. So kind of a long answer, Yvonne. I don't know if we're getting there, but I think this is big work for our generation that has now come up with such brilliant technology. But we still have to have a reason to bridge divides. And to me, that comes more out of a shared experience, some way where you pierce through to the possibility of connection.
Exactly. I think, that shared experience, piecing through connection, connecting through our shared humanity, I think definitely will help us to get there. We are now at our final question for the prepared interview segment. Our final question is, what advice do you have for individuals in the African diaspora who wish to connect to their African roots?
Okay, so the first piece of advice we can't do right now, which is to travel, we've got to have the experience. And I think but we can start preparing to have an experience where the diaspora can see and experience Africa on their own terms. We can start preparing now. So my first thing is get that savings account, because the darn plane tickets are too expensive. but we got to start saving up, because the minute the vaccines are in and the bans are off, we need to all come back and visit. And I think Ghana is a great country for the English-speaking countries. Half of Africa speaks French, so I also speak French. So people need to experience this. And I think we need to have a different attitude. To me, what is often missing is we're sort of told, it sort of sounds like something you must do, like take vitamins or something, instead of joy. I mean, what my deepest memories and the things, it's just entirely fun. And we don't talk about like a visit back to the homeland of Africa, like a cruise or like something fun. We often talk about it like a should or a must. And we don't talk about like amazing food, dancing until 3 a.m., finding friendships. I'm wearing a jacket that was made for me custom, and I would never get to afford this in Macy's, somebody made it for me, a tailor right there. I think we miss the draw of this is going to be delightful. And, I've certainly had my bouts of tough travels in Ghana. I've actually had them in every country. But I think we miss kind of the joy of it all, the joy of connecting. And it is why I ran around trying to get as many people as we could to the HACSA conference in 2019. And I really, when it comes back live again in 2022, I hope it's, 4 times the size. And I hope that in the intermediate time, some of these virtual tours that we're able to do, opening our eyes to what could be, I think, but we're a diaspora that needs to see some of the roots. And for me, I've gone back to Ghana maybe 10 times since I lived there as a child. And every time I learn more. And I feel like it's a longer journey. It isn't just one thing that will help people connect. But I do really put in a plug for let's have an experience, and hopefully an experience that's somewhat lovingly arranged for you. What HACSA did was give us kind of a peer group, a family to reconnect. And yes, I have this beautiful Ghanaian family. It's huge. Not everybody does. So entering back into the continent in a kind of embraced way is a beautiful way to reconnect. So anyway, I would say save the money now. Let's spend 2021 saving up so we can all afford our plane ticket and our designer jackets at some point.
I'll welcome everyone back. HACSA will be the surrogate family for everyone.
That's what we need. You need a surrogate family. Yes.
Yeah, please come. So thank you so much, Ms. Mensah. This has truly been a joy. We will now turn to our questions from our audience. And I know that given all the things that we've discussed today, there's probably a lot of questions for Ms. Mensah. So I'm hoping to see some questions from our audience now. Please, you can enter your question in the chat, or you can also use the raise hand icon and I'll acknowledge you so you can answer your question directly to Ms. Mensah. Okay. Do we have any first questions?
Hi, I would love to ask a question. I want to thank Ms. Lisa for sharing your life experience. I gained so many insights just from hearing your story, so really thank you for that. I actually want to go back to one of your earlier points where you talked about the deeper bias that kind of was brought forth by this racial reckoning. How much of that bias do you think was conscious or subconscious, right? How much of that bias do you think this racial awakening forced people to either realize their subconscious bias or confront their very conscious bias? And I frame that in the context of, like the bird watching situation with Amy Cooper, where you see that for so long, African Americans have been almost what it seemed like to a lot of white Americans crying wolf when we said, like, the system is not for us. There's so many levels of systemic oppression. And then you see situations with Amy Cooper where almost knowingly, almost inherently, our white colleagues or white counterparts knew how to weaponize race, right? So how much of that deeper bias through this racial awakening do you think was conscious versus subconscious?
Wow, Geneva, deep question. I I mean, in your question, you're already pointing us into what is so tough. It's so tough to get to the subconscious bias. You know, I remember there was this image of, you know, the submerged iceberg.
Yeah.
You can only see the little top of it. And I think that's what America's more reckoning with right now. You know, the Amy Cooper story. So she reports a Harvard-educated bird watcher as, you know, attacking her or something, you know, because he's Black. And, you know, I feel we are still, you know, that's the example of subconscious bias that's weaponized. You know, she's just going to use, I'm sure she thinks, or she thought beforehand, that she was a pretty good person with no racial biases. And when it came out, she wasn't. And I think for me, there's so much under that iceberg. And I don't have enough years to live to deal with the entire iceberg. So I keep saying,
I guess that's where I come in and try.
Yeah, we're going to be on this for a while. But here's what I was saying about being a Black woman that's had a chance to lead a major department of government, that's had a chance now to lead a nonprofit. You know, what we have to do is step in when we can and use the networks that we can to get the shot, to push, and then to, you know, deliver. And I think that's, I want to just tell people to we may never get to everybody's 90% that's submerged. And I'm really glad we're conscious. You know, people rose up against the Amy Coopers of the world and said, okay, that isn't really right. You cannot weaponize racism like that. So let's take some of what we've been given in the space and try to march forward. You know, I see companies now reckoning with boardrooms and companies now trying to say, we want to shift our hiring practices. All right, let's hold them to it, you know? So, but your question is very deep. Unconscious and conscious bias. Wow, of course, we are still dealing with the effects of that. And it's so deep. I really am not a psychologist. I don't know how to get down into the iceberg, but I do know that it's a good moment to at least push forward when we've got an opening. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Theodora. Thank you, Lisa. I did see a hand raised from Thierry. Thierry, I don't know if you still have your question.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Lisa. You talked earlier on about being raised Ghanaian and being in a house where that's how you were raised. My question really is, as a mother, how are you, like, what are you doing to impart that on your kids? Like, what do you want them, at the end of the day, how do you want them to feel and to be raised?
And I think they're listening to this, so you ask an interesting question. Yeah. They're in their 20s now, so in some cases the die is set. There are a couple of things that I thought about as a mother. And it started with my kids' names. Akan naming traditions are so beautiful to me. And even though my classmates could never pronounce my middle name, I'm Sewa. I'm named by my father for Friday, the day I was born on, Sewa after his mother. I started with their names, and my kids have Ghanaian names as their middle names. And very important for me that they would carry this part of their heritage, even when their peers can't pronounce them. So I have an Akosia and a Yao. And then what I wanted them to see, and they knew their grandfather, we all got a chance to travel to Ghana together in 2014. And they were teenagers, so they were old enough to appreciate this, to meet their aunts, to go through the rituals of libation, to see my fathers, their grandfathers, to be surrounded all day long by true speakers, to realize the world doesn't speak English. They had that experience. So I wanted them to have an experience. They also came back with me to the HACSA conference in 2019. But I think foundationally, what I wanted them to always see, and they're close to their grandparents on my husband's side, on their North Carolina African-American side as well. I wanted them to understand probably those things my dad taught me, the respect, the work, and the walk. I wanted them to see how resilient their African and African-American forebears were, because I knew the world would send them curveballs. I wanted them to feel that work was a good thing. And so we tried in our family to insist on that. And I wanted them to understand deeply the respect of the individual. And to me, that comes from, it actually comes from being forced to listen. Yes, your ideas are important as a human being, as a child, but one of the points of parenting is also to listen to others. And that's a lesson to infuse all through life. So Chira, you ask a deep question. I feel like it was really important for me to share this heritage. The kids have their North Carolina heritage as well as their Ghana heritage. And they have their white American heritage too. So it just turns out that this is a good time in America to actually take a deep breath. We aren't out of the most racist time in our heritage, and to say we will use all of these strands to forge a better country. And I'm real hopeful about this millennial Xer generation, because I think they're wired for connections and to push through. What we've always said is diversity breeds excellence. If you can get us all with our differences, it's not that we all have to become the same. We don't have to become white. We have to use everything we've got to build something better. That's the sort of ideal workplace and citizenship. So I hope my kids and their peers in this generation really get to take all the strands and do something even better than we did. So.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Mensah. I will, I'd like to just kind of indicate a little bit of the order just so that we're all aware. We have a chat that has come in from Ambassador Swanaker, and then following after which I will read that question in the chat, we will then have a question from Catherine, Charlie, and then Grace. So I'll begin with the question from Ambassador Swanaker. She's asking, what other countries in Africa have you visited, and how did those countries compare to Ghana?
Well, thank you for the question. Je parle français. Alors, I really enjoyed visiting Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire. I worked in Centrafrique, and then I did a lot of time in East Africa. I worked for the Ford Foundation, so I was able to see East Africa, to see Kenya and Tanzania and South Africa. Everybody's different. Some similarities in food, some not. I've been in North Africa too. I learned I look the most like a Moroccan. So they all thought I was Moroccan when I finally got to North Africa. It's such a beautiful continent. And with, to me, it was just, I'm almost speechless to how much beauty there is in, I think of the clothing and the art and I think that's why I love what HACSA has done with seeing the cultural heritage, because thankfully there's still something left. I mean, it's amazing that we persisted, decades of brutal colonialism and, such being at the bottom of the international trade system that's held people back. But from every country, I've taken so much and I have so much more hope. I found the countries that have traded the most, maybe South Africa and Kenya to the north. Some of those countries have the most, like you could speak, there were trade languages that allowed some unity. And it made it, I don't know whether, I'll stop there. I think probably that's one of the most frustrating things. I think it's hard and expensive to see Africa if you're an American. You don't have a job that takes you there. And it isn't easy to travel. One person said it would be easier to get to fly to Europe to fly, across so many things that hold us back from being the continent that is easy to move around. But I guess I want to leave the sense, Ambassador, that I see so much beauty in the differences of the country. It does help to speak French as well as English if you want to see a good 30 or so of the countries. But I have great hope for the work of HACSA to keep revealing more of what this continent holds for our future.
Yes, thank you. Our next question is from Catherine. Catherine, if you could unmute your microphone and ask your question.
All right. Good afternoon, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us through this forum. I have to apologize to yourself and to the group first and foremost, as my internet bandwidth does not allow me to share my video function. So hopefully audio will suffice for the moment. Similar to you, I have mixed African heritage. Myself, I am Nigerian and Jamaican. And having grown up in West Africa and now moved to the UK, I can see that there is a lot of commonality between both Africans in the continent and Africans in the diaspora. I think most unfortunate of this is the structural racism that one might experience, which has really contributed to the underdevelopment of the continent. And of course, we know that our Africans in diaspora in America and here in the UK also experience this. I would be curious to know your thoughts on how we can, one, bridge the sort of the chasm between both peoples, so Africans in diaspora or African Americans, and similarly in the UK, and how can we work together as one people to really start to focus on things as economic empowerment and development?
So I love that. So, man, Catherine, the chasm is real, and I don't have too many ideas about the bridging that I haven't already spoken to, but I think it begins with connection. We're going to have to make a personal choice. Usually our jobs and our shopping, just as normal if we're outside of Africa, don't just take us there. It's not just an easy route, so we have to make a choice. I will spend, the passion of my life is questions of economic development. So you give me a minute to say that. And I think there's so much in store for us here. And I have the pleasure of serving on the Fidelity Bank of Ghana board. And so I get to see a young bank invest in this country and move. And I think one thing is going to happen with our money, our diaspora money. We will have, I believe, in the future, chances to be investors, chances to just hold an account. We're delighting just being able to hold our money in Fidelity Bank. It's fun to have an account to transact with when we're with. So I think as consumers, we have a role to play. And then as investors, both ourselves and as we push our government, I think people didn't understand that the Department of Agriculture, which I worked with under President Obama, is really an investor in economies. And for my case, it was in rural America. And I think there's going to be great opportunities to keep working on the economic development of our ancestors and our current, I think it was said at HACSA, the diaspora has to care about this continent in order for it to flourish. Our diaspora wealth, is going to have an opportunity to be investors. It's a little like what I said, whenever we talk about visiting Africa, it's sort of like a PBS movie. We never talk about the fun part. I think we never talk as members of the diaspora about what it will feel like to invest in this continent. It will probably be the high yielding, just sheer capitalism. It will probably be one of the best opportunities in the coming decades here. So I say, chasm, we've got to make friends. We should be holding our money in our accounts. And this will come more as we visit. So kind of a broad answer, but I hear you on the challenge of bridging the chasm. I do have hope that we can be part of a kind of investment and development that is different from the past. It doesn't have to be rapacious. It can be sustainable. All the millennial values that we're now taking forward, we can work on economies from the bottom up. All the things that are part of my passion for how change can happen.
Thank you so much for that response. And I definitely agree with all that you said. I very much view it as a cycle. As the diaspora starts to really look at opportunities to invest in Africa, Africa starts to become a place of opportunity. And so when you have people who may have been born in the Caribbean or in the UK or in America, any African country is an opportunity for you to relocate. You can move to Ghana, you can move to Lagos, you can move to South Africa. It doesn't want to seem like that's kind of, it's not as comfortable as living in the States. The more you invest in the continent, the more the continent becomes a viable option for their peoples in diaspora to relocate if that's something they wish to do.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Ms. Mensah. Charlie, you have your hand up, but I see you've also entered your question in the chat. Would you like to ask your question directly to Ms. Mensah, or would you like me to read it out?
I'm happy to ask it. And based on your late dad's advice, should I call you Auntie Mensah? Thank you for excellent talk. But I was wondering if you'd read the two books by fellow Americans, one called Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which Ava DuVernay is turning into a documentary series. And the other is Biased by Jennifer Eberhardt from Stanford. And I found them both fascinating in terms of outlining the scale of the problem that we face. But what I was wondering was, within your role, what do you do to try and create allyship among the whites so that they are part of the group that are helping us to deal with the issues of white supremacy? Because I don't know about you, but I feel very strongly we can't do it alone. And we do need white allies. And I was wondering, in your government work, whether you have any opportunities to create allyship with the whites so that they can help us achieve what we all think we need to achieve.
Yeah, beautiful question. I'm a audiobook listener to Wilkerson, and I haven't read the book on bias, but you ask a powerful question on allyship. And I think just to connect back to the first question about Black History Month, I think we have, this has been a year in America that has taken the allyship concept to new heights. And I want to give you an example. I have been working on establishing Black businesses and getting more investment into some of the most disinvested corners of America. Those are heavily in the Blackest states: Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, and it is why I work on questions of community development finance, because I believe those institutions are moored in place, ready to help. This is the year that companies like Google and Twitter came to my organization with over $270 million of debt capital from the CFO's offices to help reinvest in these areas, and not just, fake. This is 10-year money at very, very low interest rates that we can relend. And I'd say that as an example of allyship. These were white leaders who are leading America's and global companies, who I think feel compelled to speak to their boardrooms, to their employees, and they are revealed as individuals who would like to be contributors. And I know we have such reason to be skeptical of business leaders or white leaders, with reason. But I also think we have to be ready to take a hand and say, then walk with me. And when it is time to do that, and as long as I can hold my head up and say, was this fair money? Was it fairly priced? And did they trust me? Then I feel that's an allyship. That isn't just patronizing photo op or blog. It's ally. And I feel it's there. I really do. And I feel this is an opportunity that we need to show people working examples of how to do work in partnership. And we need to push them for bold moves. So I think it's possible. And that's the work I want to keep doing. So I want to take this moment, this crisis, this mess that we've been in, and use it to do real work. So I hope we can do that.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Ms. Mensah. So before I ask Grace to ask her question, we are very fortunate to have some of our Francophone members in this webinar. So I'm hoping that they'll take the opportunity, given that Ms. Mensah is fluent in French, you can definitely ask her. Well, we'll see. You can ask your question in French and we'll see. We'll see how that exchange will work. But please, we do encourage our Francophone members to participate in this Q&A session as well. Grace, if you could kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Sister Lisa, good to see you.
Grace.
Yes, I wanted to say, I agree with you. I mean, I grew up in Ghana, and each time I go to a HACSA conference, I learn something new. I remember in the bus ride with your dad to Kwamufie, and I learned how our crops have the name they have. You know, if they're not originally a Ghanaian crop, they have a different name. And now I brag about it like I knew it all along. So but in talking about biases and the low expectation, I grew up in Ghana, so there's a lot that I really didn't know firsthand. So I learned that through my children's education. Listening to their teachers go, oh, you did that? How did you know that? You know, and it's written in red ink in their essays, circled, you know. I remember my older one, did this beautiful Egypt artwork, and the teacher just wrote on there 0 marks because she thought she had traced it. And I never understood what that meant. So recently I was talking to my children, and the question of, we went to school, we were like the 1 or 2 Black people in our school. And they said, we will never do that to our children. So for immigrants who are not really savvy in navigating this, what are the resources that we have? Because it starts out this small, you know, and I am grateful for being able to take my kids to Ghana, for them to learn who they are, to understand they are greater than what the 3rd grade teachers, expectation of them. And, even in the adult workforce, you experience this, I did a presentation. I was like, oh my goodness, you're so smart. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm here, this, So I am really excited about this generation because they can read the room. They know who's being phony. They know what is real. And I just want to know what can we do as a people that have these experiences because we always say we want to make it better for the next group of persons so they don't have to experience what our children did, or how do we pass that forward so somebody isn't experiencing it at home and not calling it for what it is.
Yeah. I love, Grace, your term, how do we help them navigate, and how do we help parents navigate when they're not, when even the questions of deep bias are not as visible to the parents. And
Because
it's such a deep question. I don't have a simple answer. I think, Bill Clinton said once that if you can have just a couple of adults that believe in you in your life, you can do great things. Doesn't even have to, it helps if it's your parents, And I think one of the things that is so important if you are not in the culture is that you need some helpers, somebody who helps believe in your kids, who can say, oh, no, that's not the way it should go. And for me, those have always come from social connections, from churches, and frankly, to connect with Charlie's question, we need allies in the white community who will pull us. My father got his first job because his then white father-in-law said, take a chance on this kid, and he became the corporate metallurgist for the largest corporation in the state at the time. But I think in navigating, we need allies. And I think we've got to break out of, and you often need allies from outside of your small circle. My mother played that role of being an ally for Africans, for Cambodians, for, you need somebody who will pull you. And if they're not in your life, you have to look for the connections that will help pull them. And I think as parents, we have to share that there's others who can help pull our kids along. And that's often a trust issue with us. But we could use some help. So you've asked a deep, deep question. And but what's coming to me is a sense of we're going to pierce through and hold that we are greater than a world that doesn't often put us in the media or may have deep submerged bias. We're going to hold to our truth of how radiant we are. We are going to need some allies to affirm this. And I hope we are the kind of parents who affirm that of our children. But anyway.
thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Grace, for your question. We're now nearing the end of the webinar, but we have two live questions, one question in the comment box and one last final comment. So Theodora, if you could kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Hi, Lisa, how are you?
Hey, Auntie Theodora.
Hi, I just had a question. I work in financial services and it's pretty much a very white industry in terms of on the brokerage side of it. And I've been in it for about 35 years now, but over the years, at least this year in particular, I've seen like a huge change where it looks like financial service companies are actually stepping up to the plate. And even with the firm I work with, we've had this whole Black History initiative. We've been having meetings on diversity, and there is a heightened awareness. And it appears that they're actually taking it very seriously. And I was wondering, from your perspective, what can we do within these organizations that can help? While we have this momentum going, what can we do to help push it along from your perspective?
Oh, good. Thank you for raising that, Auntie Theodora. I totally agree that finance is one of the last bastions that African Americans have not penetrated greatly, or people of color at all. It's because it's power. Money and power go together. So good for you and I think it's real. I think the shift this year is real. We have a first Black woman CEO of TI announced yesterday. To me, it's stunning. I felt very lonely in the 80s, starting my career in finance. But I think you're asking the exact right question. What do we do to take, this is a moment. So I think there are two levels. One is we should be pulling as many people into this field as we can at a time when people are willing to look broader. Management is looking broader at who can come into our fields. So that's the people, that's the recruiting side. They're looking at bigger. I always say, if I could learn finance, anybody can. I'm not a math brain. I'd much rather sing than do math and percentages. So if I could learn this, and we should open up. The other thing, Theodora, that I'm encouraging now is to force finance to be serious with its money. That's where the real changing people and changing money is two things. And the forcing is, this is the moment where people are investing. In America, the Business Roundtable came together and said, we want to do serious recommitments, reinvestments. And this we should be counting and holding. It means investing in minority-led institutions that are financial. It means, if you're on the brokerage side, assisting the kind of ways, not just more lectures on financial literacy, but putting our resources to accelerate, to match savings of people. Let's really count dollars and count how let's get those commitments flowing now. And one of the things we're doing, we created a finance justice fund. And we said to America's corporations, come, we want to raise $1 billion to push down into the economy of deep poverty. So I think we got to be serious with our managements and say, bring in new people and let's share the money. So there are ways that you don't have to lose the money. You can loan it at low interest rates so that you can participate in lifting up the next group. So that's what I would say to the finance industry. But I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see an aperture for opening.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Lisa. So we actually do have a French question. So if we could, I think, Christine, if you could kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Merci beaucoup, Lisa. Bonjour. C'est un honneur, un bonheur de t'écouter. It's an honor and so happy to hear what you say about the value of what we are inside of us. Lisa, ma question est la suivante. Y a-t-il eu dans les différentes rencontres internationales dans ces pays plutôt africains, une différence de réaction entre les anglophones et les francophones, et y a-t-il eu aussi des négociations différentes pour pouvoir pour pouvoir faire en sorte que l'Afrique soit gagnante par rapport aux différentes négociations dans ton expérience? Encore merci pour ce webinaire, encore merci pour tes mots.
Merci pour la question, Christiane. C'est très profonde, mais d'être très précise. Entre les anglophones et les francophones, vous cherchez si moi, je vois une différence.
Voilà, de réaction par rapport à la grandeur de l'Afrique. Je veux dire, si on met plus en avant dans cette particularité de la langue, y a-t-il une prise en charge plus, je veux dire, vers la grandeur et la grandeur et la mise en valeur de l'Africain?
She asks, is there really a difference between Anglophone and Francophone Africans about the grandeur of Africa and the role of Africa? You know, do Anglophone and Francophone Africans see this somewhat differently? You know, what is the place of Africa today? What is it's a deep question. And I love French because even the words, even when I try to translate them into English, we don't have the right ones. So because you're asking something profound. It's interesting, and I'm not an expert, and I'm not a sociologist. I'm just an American who's traveled and tried to learn French all my life. But here's what I've experienced. And so I will answer this for me, and I'll answer in English. I think when I'm in the Francophone parts of Africa, what is notable to me is that something in the colonial experience I diminished more of African roots. And I think it is more of a block toward thinking of a continental unity and thinking that the African spirit itself is to be valued above all things. And maybe it's because I spent time around a more educated group of, this is not speaking of Francophone, I'm thinking my mind is going to being in Central Africa or being in Senegal. And I have one anecdote to say, you know, one of the things that is so interesting to me about Ghana is that when a formal event occurs, Ghanaians show up in Ghanaian attire. Men wear their cloths draped over the left shoulder. You would never have a really formal moment of importance and think that you shouldn't be there in your Ghanaian attire, whether it's Northern or Southern Ghana, and you would wear this. This was not my experience in Central Africa. You know, the most formal moments, people dressed French, you know, African, they were in lighter. And the anecdote I say is that I experienced the two cultures as I found, maybe it's this sense that the French had colonial experience was more effective in saying you should be part of Greater France than the British colonial experience. But in my own sense, the Francophone African experience wasn't looking next door to feel more African. They were looking more north to feel more part of a greater diaspora of Francophone. And I think it's different. And I'm not a student enough of this.
Yes.
But I think language matters. So the fact that we have so many countries where the real primary language is French, and it's hard to learn French. And then we have all these countries where it's really English. I think it is a block to really coming together. We are all Africans and African diaspora. Okay. But I think language can make barriers. And yes. I'm so proud of HACSA for on fait un effort de parler en français plutôt que l'anglais.
Of course.
C'est important. Even in our HACSA conferences, we tried to do some in French and some in, I met the first Francophone Ghanaians at HACSA. So I think I'm saying that I believe the colonial experience did us no favors in the way we thought ourselves as a continent. And I think language remains a barrier. But I think that there are some countries like Ghana that have a more fierce, in my experience, a fierce attachment to own older African roots. So I'm going to get in trouble if I say too much more. But my big hope is maybe with a little more Google Translate and a little more visiting, we can bridge even the anglophone, francophone.
J'en suis sûre, parce qu'avec les personnalités qu'on a, les espoirs, les enfants, les valeurs, il n'y a pas de raison qu'on n'y arrive pas.
The children, the values, and the hope. We have much hope ahead.
Yes. Merci, Lisa. Merci.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank Mrs. Mensah. Thank you, Christiane. So we do have our final question in the chat box from Dorcas, and then we'll follow that, conclude with comments from Charlie as well as Ambassador Swanaker. So our question from Dorcas in the chat is, one, Lisa, thank you so much for your enthusiasm. I wonder how long will it be before our heritage is recognized by all globally?
That is beautiful. One of the things that I got to meet Ambassador Swanaker, the founder of HACSA, in when she was serving as an ambassador in France. And she saw how complex it was to have African sites designated as World Heritage sites. And I think this is part of it. First, we must all take our heritage seriously. And then we must force the international bodies to recognize this year of return that we just experienced, honoring the 400 years of the Atlantic slave trade, to me was part of affirming and holding our heads up as a diaspora and saying, we are such a vital part of the world's history. But I think there's some heavy slogging ahead. And it comes to some of these issues like preserving heritage sites. I'm so impressed by the work HACSA did to, preserve the slave trading history, these last remaining reports that are still here that force us to reckon with truths. So I hope, Dorcas, that part of this heritage work that we're all involved in as HACSA is doing the sort of daily slogging of insisting on the preservation, insisting on opening up parts of our tourism to this history, and getting the world to acknowledge, why our world is as it is today, thanks to the contributions, sadly taken in many cases of Africans. So I have a lot of hope for that, and it is one of the reasons why I'm so active with HACSA.
Thank you, Ms. Mensah. Thank you. We did have a few, to conclude, we did have a few interesting comments in the chat box that I just want to read for the benefit of the audience as well as Ms. Mensah. So in response to your question to Grace, in response to Grace's question, Charlie just wanted to note that we need a specific, particularly to Ambassador Swaniker and to HACSA, but also just for everyone else to note, is that we need a specific campaign to challenge teachers on this. And I think we would definitely all agree with your comment, Charlie. We also have a final comment from Ambassador Swaniker. And in addition to noting our website, as well as encouraging everyone to donate, we'll be hearing a little bit more about that as well. But Ambassador Swaniker is encouraging everyone, please go to www.thehacsA.org to join the HACSA Sankofa network. Every penny will help us to deal with systemic racism through education and human development. We are grateful for all forms of help. I think if we think about the deeper bias that Ms. Mensah was speaking about, it really links to systemic racism, and it's organizations like HACSA that can help us to address that issue. So please visit us at www.thehacsA.org to be able to donate and join the Sankofa network. So I believe that concludes our session. Unfortunately, this has been, a wonderful topic, and I know we'd like to continue discussing, which we will have an informal engagement later. But as far as the formal engagement, I think it has now come to an end. Ms. Mensah, if you could conclude with your final comments for our viewers.
I just thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I don't like talking about myself as much as I like talking about the work I want to do in the world. Today, you gave me a chance to do both, HACSA, so I deeply appreciated this. This wonderful organization has given me and my family a chance to reconnect with roots and to find a lovely community that's just deeply meaningful. And I look forward to years ahead and to seeing this network expand. So thank you all.
Thank you again, Ms. Mensah. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wonderful insights on cultural diversity. And thank you for everyone for your wonderful questions.